Welcome to the latest episode of PR Chat Future, folks. We are super hyped for this one. We have got Nicholas Hoxter with us, our first guest, branch manager at LandCare, running operations in DC, Dallas area. And the thing we are most excited about is mounted on the wall behind him. It's a drone. It's a drone and it's here.
It's here. I can put it up and let it hover above my head a little bit. Safety wouldn't like that.
Dude, it can hold your halo for you.
Yeah. Right. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. It has a pretty powerful LED light on the bottom of it that you can turn on at night, and it's really, really bright. And I've used it, in my backyard, like flying into the backyard. Not supposed to fly at night, but it was at dawn. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, when you said halo, it's like something's coming down upon you in the light rays.
Yeah.
Pretty cool stuff. Just one of the many, many features that the drone has.
Makes me think of disco drones. It's like you can have parties and you can have drones with disco lights in them.
Yeah. Just hover it out over your party. Yeah.
Good stuff, man. Really appreciate you coming on here and helping us bring this out. What goes into actually flying the drone, the benefits of using it in a branch, and helping take shots of the property, maybe for the property manager, maybe for yourself. So we'll just dig into it in a bit.
Absolutely. I like to tell people always ask, they're like, what do you do with the drone? And it's just like, well, the sky's the limit. Really, but literally, I mean, there's so much you can do, and so many people that it can benefit, in my opinion, that there's not really just one thing in particular. There's many, many things.
So how'd you get into this, Nick? Because this isn't your first position in the industry. You worked around the industry. You have a passion for technology. What kind of drove you to where you are now? What have you done in the past that led you here? Anything interesting to let the viewers kind of know where you're coming from?
Yeah, so the whole drone thing was sparked when I was an account manager at another company, and especially in the DC area, it's so congested with traffic, and even though a job site is a couple miles down the road, you look at Google Maps, it's an hour and a half to get there. Like, oh my goodness. So, ultimately, I bought my own drone because it was like, this is going to make my life, my job easier, and I'm going to be able to do more because I'll have real-time images or real-time orthomosaics, 3D models of my properties. So then I could spend less time behind a wheel and pop on a program, look at my images, and measure certain enhancements, or anything really. It's like count the rocks on the ground because it's so high definition. So that's ultimately how I got into it, and then it just kind of excelled from there and really got traction.
So you mentioned a few things that you're doing with it. This is still somewhat a new technology for the landscaping industry. Why should any landscape company look at this technology or invest in this technology? And are there companies that should not do it, either at this point or at all?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I thought a lot about that, and I always think, why wouldn't you? I mean, this is not a $20,000 piece of equipment. This one up on the wall right here is a little bit higher end, but $900, call it. There's other ones that DJI makes that are very entry level, but
$800 right here.
There you go. Right. And so it's that. And then, when you start doing it outside of recreational use, you need to have the commercial license. But once you get that license, you spend that time. For me, it took about 3 months to study. And it's pretty involved, but so is getting your pesticide license. I kind of looked at it as like, this is just another license to benefit the business. So I spent that time, got the license, got the drone. There's some different programs and whatnot that you can use on the back end, but the upfront cost is not crazy. And the perspective that it can provide to you, your customers, and people just watching your business grow, it's super valuable in my opinion. So I like to answer that is just, why wouldn't you give it a shot? You don't know unless you give it a shot. And going back to when I was account manager, I just did it. I put it on my dime. I just did it, and then saw the value, and it everything that it was unlocking was like, holy crap! For what I paid with my own money to do this, a business could easily explore that, right?
So when you say studied for it, like how much time did you spend on it? Like where were you studying all this stuff from?
Yeah, so I used an online program called Drone Pilot Ground School. And I think for that course, they have like different sales going on, but I think I had paid like $200 for it. And that's a lifetime access to the course. It took me about 3 months to work through all their modules, which prepared me for the test for the FAA to take the Part 107. It's called specifically for drones. I was taking the test next to guys that were learning and were going to go fly 747s. It's like, people are like, you're a pilot? And it's like, yeah.
Drone pilot.
Yeah, you are considered a pilot, and then you get this fancy little
look at that. Does that
USA on it? It says remote pilot, whereas other people have actual pilots. But and it's a great feeling. It was a great feeling to pass and achieve that, and now that's mine forever. Unlike pesticide licenses, you don't have to go and get credits year over year. It's spend 3 months to study it right, and achieve this license, and you're good to go.
What all did you learn from that course apart from like flying the drone?
I learned that I don't want to fly airplanes. So it gets, at times it gets pretty detailed. Like if you just Google an aeronautical map, those are pretty intense. You look at there's so much information in one little area, and you have to know all of that when you throw up one of these. Now there's other tools out there. You don't have to read an aeronautical map every time, and you don't have to call the flight control every time you want to throw one of these up. It's called LANC, LANC or something like that. But it's basically a quick approval through the FAA. Like say if I'm in the Dulles Airport region, and I have my Part 107 license, and I have this app that it's called Kitty Hawk, and it allows me to do a quick submission to the FAA, and within seconds, I get approval from the airport saying, you're good to fly in this area for this amount of time at no more than this height above ground level. And you're covered. It's that simple. And I've heard a lot on a couple of my posts on LinkedIn. I think someone commented, they're like, oh, this is really cool, only if it wasn't so strict in the DC area. Yes, it is for reasons, but it's not. You have your license. There's a more extended process to follow to get approval. But I've flown this drone blocks from the Capitol building in DC. It took 3 months to get that approval, and a letter from the mayor and a letter from the owner of the company that I was doing it for. So, but all that, it's possible. Don't look at the DC metropolitan area as just not worth it. Like, you can't fly there. You can. There's just certain processes that you need to follow.
I think that's an important point because, you know, I've even said before on these episodes that it's difficult for us to be able to fly a drone in the DC area. And it is difficult from what you're saying, but it's certainly not impossible. And I think thanks to today's technology, which can look at real-time air traffic and say, hey, yes, you're approved to fly at this location at this height for this amount of time. So it has significantly reduced the amount of hoops that you need to jump through from when drones first came out. And it was a really ridiculous process to try and get approval to fly in those areas. So I think that's definitely something worth mentioning, that if you are afraid of restrictions, that it's not as bad with restrictions, and it's a lot easier to get approval even where there are restrictions.
Absolutely.
I think to add to this thought that I think we need to keep folks real about what goes into like getting this off the ground. So like you were saying with learning, you were saying with permissions, something that I noticed given that I just bought it last weekend.
Did you really?
Yeah, so along with this camera I was showing you, right, the vlogging setup, I bought this drone too. And by the way, it's $800 because I bought the extra batteries and like the whole pack. It was just $600 with the remote that I have here. And so, but then, so all the excitement of buying that drone, right? We get this back to our home, and then we are like trying to make sense of, oh, you know, what connects with what, and you know, you have to update the firmware. And you are sort of shooting in the dark here, like you don't know what is going to make this thing work. I still can't even like turn on the remote in one go. I have to like pick. I know there is a long press, there is a short press, there is some weird combination to it, and one of them work, but I don't know which one of them actually works. Same thing with the drone. And then they just like, I was just, you know, after like 2-3 hours into it, they decided to pair up. I don't know how that happened. Now that they are talking to each other, I don't have to do that again. But then after they paired up, I didn't know like how I can make the drone fly. And remember, this is like 2 in the night. I'm trying to figure it out, and then suddenly Eastern Daylight Time or savings time kicks in, and it's 3. And then I'm like, dude, I have like, I gotta get up in the morning and stuff. And so I give it up because it's like so. And then I'm like, oh, I have to install DJI software on my Mac to make it go. And then my Mac is throwing up malware warnings. And I'm like, I don't know how that's gonna work. And then I just go to sleep. In the morning, I find a post where it says, oh, you have to clear the cache in your remote, and it's gonna fly. And I clear the cache. I click a button.
That's such a funny story, man. And it reminds me of when I got mine for the first time. And it's almost like a warning to people. When you get one, it's so like you're so juiced up. Like, this is so cool. It's such a cool piece of technology. I got to figure it out right now. Take your time. Take your time. Read the manuals. Read through it all. Really learn a device before you jump right into it. Because I had like a similar experience. It's like, I need to fly this right now. It's dark. Legally, you shouldn't be flying when it's dark, but I went out on my back deck and I'm like, all right, time for liftoff. Turns out the sensors on the one that I had before, like, they rely pretty heavily on light. It has a bunch of camera sensors. So it started drifting away and away, and I'm like, no. And I hit right into my roof. It fell and hit the gutter and fell all the way down. First flight ever. Because I was so pumped up about this. It's like, okay, next time I'm going to learn from this mistake. And I didn't. Second time. So excited with this. There's all kinds of features that DJI has on them. One of them is called like active track or something, where it can lock on a car or an individual, and it's similar to your stick one. I imagine it has the same functionality, where it'll follow you, right? So I had it locked on to me while I'm out in my driveway. I'm like, sweet, I'm running over here. It's turning and looking at me. I'm running over there. It's turning and looking at me. It's like, okay, let's try the orbit function, right? So it locks onto me and orbits autonomously. I set the orbit in the wrong direction and almost at full speed. And it went whoom right into my garage door, but it looked at me the entire time.
Yeah,
amazing.
Reminds me you're checking out a girl and bump into a fire pole, right?
So yeah, some advice when you get one: just take your time, because there's a lot to literally unbox the drone itself, but then like every feature that it offers, there's a lot to it. So take your time when getting into it, for sure.
100%. There's something that you mentioned. I want to dig into it a bit. You said one of the things you use it for is you get the imagery and then you use it for like to do measurements. One objection that folks would have to that is like, well, why don't you like just do it on some aerial imagery tool, like getting out there, flying the drone, spending the time to collect the imagery and everything, and then getting access to it. Like there's something else going on here. I'm sure that's why you're doing it.
Yeah, awesome question. The DC area is growing like crazy. Data centers pop up like that. One day there's just a field with trees, and the next they're all gone and half the building's built. So there's been times frequently that we run into a building that was just built that we need to do a takeoff on and provide a high quality bid, and you pop on Google or whatever, any sort of service, and it's not there. Even some of like the near maps, they're more frequent than Google satellite flyovers, but sometimes they're not there as well. So what are your options? You break out that old measuring wheel and get to work.
God forbid.
Yeah, and after I spent an hour in traffic getting there, I'm like already behind. So another thing to make my life easier is like a drone can do this, right? So you can get on site, and you could do a pre-flight on a couple different programs offer it that sync up to DJI, and you can map out the flight pattern that you want to do, and that it's basically when you're doing these maps to get these takeoff, these orthomosaic overlays, you're taking a lot of photos, hundreds of photos, sometimes thousands, depending on the property, and they need to be overlapped so the program can stitch them all together. And so, but there's software out there that will do all that for you. Basically, you set the amount of overlap that you want. You set if you're going for 3D views, you could set the grid pattern. It's pretty crazy. So, and it's super simple to where you upload that to your drone. You have that on your phone. You connect. You show up on site, you drive over to your predetermined takeoff area, you hit play, and you can get right back into your car as long as you have sight of the drone at all times, and email. So the drone takes off by itself, starts taking all those images in the path that you determined on your computer in your office, and you're fiddling away with other stuff. If it needs a recharge or rebattery, it'll come right back to where it took off. Swap it out, hit play again, and you're good. So that over wheeling around a measurement wheel, take that all day.
So that's an amazing piece of technology, because we've talked about a lot on these episodes how important the foundation of a map is, and how it should be the place that you store all information about that property, because you can geotag exactly where something is. So by using this drone technology, you're able to take that a step farther, because you can show close-ups of the property that have better detail, more pixels than a satellite image could. So you can have higher resolution images that you're sharing with your customers. Plus, the concept of creating a 3D walkthrough of their property is also something that we've been excited about on the channel before, because it allows, I think a lot of times clients may not even fully understand their property. So if you say out behind building 505, well, the client may never walk out that way. So they don't really know what you're talking about. But if you can show it to them in a 3D rendering with a little dot that says, this is where I'm exactly talking about, it brings a whole different world to the client, and they can really see what's going on. So I think that's an exciting way to kind of help clients understand what's happening.
Yeah, no doubt, Mike. And, COVID was a horrible thing to hit the entire world. But for me, it was really cool, because it hit at like the right time when I was getting really in depth with the drones, and I was already making those 3-dimensional property maps, and I was doing Zoom calls like this, and we were walking the property virtually with these maps that the drone created, and people were blown away. They're not going out to their properties as much, and we were still able to provide peace of mind, really, about here's what your property looks like. I just flew it the other day. This is real. So it was a huge tool for me during COVID, no doubt.
One of the other exciting things that I think is coming, and I've talked about at some conferences, not sure if the tech's really there yet, wide scale. I know it's being utilized in nurseries and things like that, but the idea of tagging plants or trees with RFID tags so that you can do inventory on properties and understanding what's happening with those, or even RFID chips that can report back some type of sensor measurement, whether it's soil pH or nutrient level, something like that. Have you started working with anything like that? Are you taking a look at that technology to see how you can implement it into your business? Or is it still a little too far down the road yet in your mind?
I think it's, as far as like those tags and the sensors, I have not dabbled in those, but the concept of an inventory for a property, I've always loved. And I try to convince people to do them. I think the tricky part with it is actually getting a customer to buy into that, because it's so unheard of in the industry. But the reality is, like the buildings or whatnot that they have on the property, like that's a huge asset for them. I think arguably the landscape is a huge asset as well. A high quality landscape is not cheap. So why would you not want to inventory everything and monitor the health and soil to make sure that it gets the life that it's designed for? I've definitely dabbled in it in some instances, but not as much as I wanted to, just because it takes a lot of time to do an inventory. So you need to charge for that. But pitching that to a customer, it always seems to just kind of go to the back burner. But yeah, I think getting some good examples of that will help sell it for sure. And then those sensors that you mentioned, that's just another add-on to it that provides value.
Yeah, it's funny because the technology required to create 3D renderings of a property is more expensive than the technology in an RFID tag. So it does take a lot more time to do a good inventory, but the actual investment cost of hardware or software is a lot lower. So it's one of those technologies that seems to be lagging behind, even though the price point is at a place that makes it more accessible to most people, where you think about a smaller company, because our companies are both multi-million-dollar companies. I think that it's always important to say that when we're talking about working with some of these technologies, but smaller companies to invest $10,000 or $20,000 into 3D rendering software is probably a little bit more hard for them to invest in a few dollar RFID tags that can just then be scanned with a drone. So it's just always interesting to see which technologies latch on and actually move faster than other technologies, because there's a lot of things that go into them. Price and usability and the output of them, are big factors.
Yeah.
Where do you think the drone tech is headed? Like, what's next?
I think, like Mike said at the beginning, this is still very, very new, and I'll stick to it. The sky's the limit. But I think I always look back. So I grew up on a 400-acre farm on the eastern shore of America. Plants have been a huge part of my life, literally for my entire life. So it's natural that I'm here working with plants and landscape. But I think growing up on the farm, I've seen a lot of things start in agriculture, and they seem to kind of work their way over into our industry, like autonomous and RTK. They're putting RTK GPS on all tractors now, and like the spraying for insects and disease is so pinpoint accurate where you don't have to flood the whole field with chemical. I think that's on its way over into our industry, and drones help with that, right? You fly a drone and get a whole image of a field, and using the multi-spectral view on some drones, you can see these hotspot areas, and that data can transmit over to the tractor doing the spraying, and it knows exactly where to spray. Pretty awesome stuff. And I think that, and it's now, I'm watching it work its way into golf course and turf grass management. It's big into. So I think it's only a matter of time before we're doing that similar stuff on customer site with their turf grass. And then I think if you want to think even further into the future, for tree care, using drones to do hazard assessments, look for these insects and disease that hit the top of the canopy first and make their way down. In the old days, you had to climb a tree to do a risk assessment. I don't think you'll have to do that much longer because of what drones can do and the whole safety side of it. I would much rather have one of my employees fly a drone up to take a look than strap on and climb up in there. Not saying that we do tree work. We worked with tree companies before, but that's the huge liability. And some of these cameras on these drones right now are super impressive. I have an old post on my LinkedIn. I think I just liked the post, but DJI has this one. It's like this maximum zoom. I think the camera takes a ridiculous, it's like 700 some megapixels. No. So these guys are using these drones to inspect those big power lines, and they're back, like 50, 75 feet. And they take that massive image, and on the computer, they zoom in and they zoom in and in and in and in and in. And you're like, when is this going to stop? And you can read the numbers on those glass insulators on the power line. That's insane. So you think about it in our world, inspecting trees, you'll be able to count the insects that are on the tree with something like that, and really be able to assess in a proper manner.
I think safety is a huge aspect, and it's like you said, just not putting people into dangerous situations, and tree care certainly has plenty of those. I think the other thing that it can do is help us with actual applications. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Hopefully you have. Hopefully we can get a clip of this into the channel. But the flamethrower drone that is burning up bees' nest and hornets' nest up in trees. I mean, that is a very exciting example of spot spraying, right? But potentially drones can do that and apply pesticides to trees where it would be otherwise too costly for us to treat, because we'd have to rent a bucket lift or we'd have to get somebody to climb the tree. So I think one thing that drones can do over time is not just provide photos for us, but actually start to do some of the work so that it becomes cheaper to do these things, and we're keeping our people safe, which I think is a huge aspect of using robotics of any kind.
Absolutely.
In terms of like looking at with the current technology you have, the current sensors you have on the drone behind you, let's say you have a property, right? And then you like fly over it twice at different points of time. Is it possible to like say how it's changed? Like, let's say you start maintaining it and then 6 months later you do a flyby again. Like what sort of monitoring can you do on a site to collect this like history of work done?
Yeah, that's a huge one. So I had still use a software called Pix4D. I think they're one of the original, taking drone images and stitching them together into orthomosaics. But they're one of their products, Pix4D Cloud, is what I use specifically. I can fly multiple times in a year, and on that specific property, it has a profile, and there's a timeline that I could scroll across, and you could literally watch the property grow over time on a program like that. And there's others out there, like Drone Deploy is one as well, that do that. But that's such a valuable tool to see where a property is going. Who wouldn't want to see that? Especially if it's not internally, to give yourself some pride in what you've done over the years. It's going to have value to the customer as well.
I think it's a great tool for internal and customer use, because one of the things that does not happen in our industry with any type of absolution is when we go do an enhancement on the property, we don't change the estimate for the next year. So if we go to a property and we add a new mulch bed that adds 50 yards of mulch to it, how often are we going back to that estimate and fixing it before we rebid it for the next year? Hopefully, if it's 50 yards of mulch, we're doing that. But I guarantee you, we're not even doing it on all 50 yards. But but especially over time, 10 yards here, 10 yards here, it adds up to 50 yards. And then that changes the scope of the contract. And rather than overcharging the customer or undercharging the customer and not having enough hours, being able to see how a property changes year over year or month over month will give you the ability and the data to go to the client and say, hey, this is why your price is changing. Because we added 50 yards of mulch. Mulch is more expensive than mowing grass. So this is why we have to make adjustments onto your estimate. So I think it's a great technology to have and can really help validate pricing changes to customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. It is, some properties are so big, right, that the property manager sometimes doesn't realize what they actually did to the property in a particular year. So when you're like, yeah, here's why your renewal is going up a bit. And they're like, I didn't add all that. And it's like, yeah, you did. Watch this. And then, it just puts it into perspective. There's no arguments right there.
Almost looks like a great marketing content too, like that time lapse happening and the property changing. It's like, I don't know what I'm imagining and what you actually do, but it is kind of catchy and worth sticking on in a field like, oh, what's up with that? I want to see what's going on.
Now that's a great question. Is there something in your mind right now where you can pass some of the cost along to clients, or is this just an add-on that you're doing to provide value to your company that nobody else is providing at this point? Because that's one of the things Utkarsh and I have talked about a lot is, when do you start kind of passing along the cost of a new technology to a client? Because I think we've agreed before that it doesn't make sense to do it in the beginning. You're trying something new. You want to see if there is value to it. Hopefully you find clients that are willing to be partners. But in your mind, is this something that has progressed to a point where you can provide enough value to a client that you could potentially start adding some of the costs to their contracts, or are you just not there yet?
Sorry, before you start answering, Nick, this is the external side of the question. The internal side of the question would be like your marketing team sort of getting this into their budget because you did a flyby and like all this cool video exists now, and that goes into the LandCare marketing or the regional sales and whatnot. So like both ways, customer acquisition cost here and like for the clients to be like, paying more because they have this add-on with the landscaping piece.
Yeah, those are great. And that's, again, going back to the beauty of one of these, it can touch so many different parts of the business marketing, internal and then directly to customers. So when you spread that cost across all of those, it's so minuscule in my opinion. So yeah, I think we're at a point where we could, if we're using it regularly and always using it on customer sites, then yeah, I think you can totally add that to the contract as long as they see value in it. And if they're like, no, I don't want you flying that thing around here, then okay, then take it off, take it out of that particular customer. But I haven't faced anyone that had an issue with it because it's such a small cost to them. With what it adds, it's worth it. But going back to the inventory part, because that part is a bit more expensive. That one, it is typically done as an enhancement. And then it kind of there's like a one-time fee to get it going and do the inventory itself of all the plants. But the drone map is so simple and quick. And even the 3D model of it is very inexpensive for what it has.
So just a generalized question for you, something that we've talked about a lot on the channel is, how do you implement new technologies into your company, into your branch? Because, we've talked before, no one likes change. Change is hard. holding people accountable to implementations is difficult and doesn't feel great at times. So how do you do it, and what's the process of implementing a new technology either within your company or within your branch? And as a branch manager, are you encouraging the people under you to bring new ideas forward and then to try them out?
Absolutely. And I think that's where it starts. If it's with a branch manager, in my opinion, and for a lot of the industry, it's with the branch manager. Yeah, there's corporate structure, support, overhead, and there's some broad pieces of technology that goes across the company. But I think if the branch manager has that spark to integrate technology, at least at LandCare, we have the ability to do it, because we're managing the P&L at the branch level. So as long as you're managing that and staying within your bounds, you can explore whatever you'd like. And that's a crucial part for a business. I think as businesses grow, say it's a small landscape company and the owner's really involved in the day-to-day, and they start to grow and have branch managers that have these ideas and want to change something in their branch, let them try it. As long as they're managing their budget, why not? Let them try it and figure it out. And yes, I encourage my entire team, all the way down to crew members, to bring ideas to the table to improve the business, not only technology, but production methods and whatnot. I think the last podcast you wrapped up the year talking about, there was one snowplow that had sectional, that's technology in a way, but very mechanical technology. So there's so much stuff that everyone can provide value on, and you should encourage that in your business.
I mean, what problems do you have with implementation? Do you have a team that is just, oh yeah, something new, we can't wait to get it going? Or is it like most teams where you've got a few people who are excited about it, a few people in the middle, and a few people that are like, why the hell are we making this change?
Yeah, I think my team is fantastic, and I got to give them a shout out for that. I think at times I might be a little too much. Let's try this. But the way I like to approach it is not like, here's a piece of technology, we're going to use this. I test it out for a decent amount of time before I even bring it to their attention and say, here's the value that I see in it. Curious what I want you guys to kind of do the same thing. Please try this out and then provide feedback, and let's make a decision as a branch, not just me. I don't want to be the only one making the decisions. I want my team to have that ownership as well. So that, I think that's extremely important.
No, I agree. I mean, getting buy-in from your team before you even really say we're going to roll this out is really important. And if you can beta test something yourself, find the value in it, present it to your team, and then say, all right, we're going to try this. Give me your feedback. If it works, great. If not, then let's look for something else that's going to make everybody's lives a little bit easier. So I think that's a great way to try and roll out new technology.
Did you actually hire your team thinking that, they should be friendly with technology, or just ended up happening?
It just ended up happening. One of my production managers, he came on at the same time as me at LandCare, and I was an account manager at that time. So really, I think it's just the approach with most people. And if they're just a little bit open-minded, they'll catch on to it if you have that right approach, in my opinion. And really, if you're excited about it, I think people kind of feed off of other people's excitement, and they get excited about it too, even if it is difficult at times. And it's important to not only implement that technology, but continue to support them in that. Don't say this is how you do it, and don't expect them to come back and ask all the questions. Constantly check in on them. How is it working? How is it flowing for you? And that's when it'll start coming out. Don't expect them to ask all the questions immediately as the tech is being implemented. Because they might not want to ask, like, they probably think that maybe this is a stupid question because Nick's all into tech and I don't want to ask a stupid question to this guy. So it's just like, try to draw the questions out of them with constant check-ins.
So I know we're running close to time here, but I have one more question, and then I think we have 2 secret questions for you, because I do remember the first secret question that we came up with. But
secret question.
But I do want to know, and I think it's important for everyone watching or following along, how do you stay apprised to technological changes in the industry? Are you going to conferences? Are you reading certain publications? Are you looking outside the industry? You mentioned agriculture. I mean, what are you doing to stay on the cutting edge of technology for the green industries landscaping?
Yeah, to sum it all up, it's conferences, podcasts, and blogs. I mean, those are the 3 big ones for me, and conferences being number 1, because the energy at like the Lawn and Landscape Tech Conference really got me fired up. Every time I go, I get fired up about technology in the industry and what it can do. So I think in your last podcast, you mentioned go to one of those. Go to at least one. You don't have to do them all because there's definitely a lot. And I would recommend, if it's technology specific, the Lawn and Landscape Tech Conference is really cool. And that's kept me driven towards my ultimate goal in life.
Excellent. All right.
Secret question time.
Yeah, secret question. Go for it.
All right. If you wanted a superpower, what would it be?
To fly.
Like, how high do you want to fly? Do you also want to have like thick skin so that you don't get sunburned? Is that like in your power list? Just gonna apply some cream and
Yeah, I think not only to fly in an atmosphere, but fly in a vacuum as well. Fun fact about me, I'm fascinated with space. It's super fascinating to me. I actually play a video game called Kerbal Space Program because I love space.
Love it. It's a great little game. Love it.
Oh my God, yeah. If you want to understand the basics of astrophysics,
did you get the second one that just came out? I'm waiting for it to come out of early access because I've seen too many bad reviews about performance issues.
Oh really? No, I do not, because I'm not a PC gamer. I'm a PS5 guy. Gotcha. So I'll be waiting on that one for a couple of years, I imagine.
Oh, that is a great secret question, by the way. I love that. We should definitely ask everyone that. That's a great one. So the original one that we had come up with, because this is Beer Chai Future, what's your favorite beer?
I am an IPA guy. IPA all the way.
Do you have a favorite brewery with a favorite production, or just you like trying IPAs?
I love trying IPAs, but if I had to go, my go-to is Lagunitas, and they're out of their West Coast style IPA.
Awesome.
Love that secret question. I thought we were supposed to drink beer while we are on the podcast, though.
Well, it is
9:30.
Yeah, we haven't told anyone we shoot these in the morning, so.
Yeah, and then we have to get back to work, right? I mean, it will be okay for me, but I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, if it was an afternoon shoot, then yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Really appreciate you spending this time with us, Nick. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and insights.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's awesome to listen to you guys' podcast and definitely keep it going because I think it could get pretty big as technology evolves and people are just genuinely curious about it. Like I said, podcast is number 2 behind conferences for me to learn new stuff. So keep it up.
Awesome.
Thanks, man. See you around.
See ya.